All right, guys, welcome back to the First Team Fantasy Podcast. Today we're going to take you through the Thursday Night Football preview, and we've got a matchup between the Chicago Bears going to the Washington Commanders. And, it should be a decent game. It's got an over-under of 44.5. The Commanders are favored by 6 points, and neither one of these defenses are that great. On Sleeper, the Commanders are the 20th ranked defense, and they're currently giving up 100. They've given up 108 points so far this season, which is not very good, as you can tell. The Bears are even worse. They're the 31st ranked, and they've given up 119 points. So I feel pretty comfortable starting a lot of my main position players in this one. I'm going to take you guys through the Commanders. Starting off with Brian Robinson, to me, in this one is an absolute must start.
Oh, yeah.
He's been getting the workload, most of the carries, and he gets all the goal line work. As the season's going on, it's like just dust. If you haven't dropped him by now, I don't know why. Right now, Brian Robinson is the RB8 in PPR format, so it's pretty damn good. And in each of the games that they've had, like a positive game script against the Cardinals, which I guess that's kind of debatable because they did struggle a bit in that one. But then when they played the Broncos, he saw 20 touches in both of those games. So I think this is one of those games where he's going to see a very large workload. Just the Washington Commanders offense all around should kind of be humming in this one. And that leads me into the receivers, which Terry McLaurin to me is also an absolute must start.
Yeah.
Each week you're seeing his targets go up. He's up to 10 targets in the last week, and it was against an Eagles secondary, which is arguably, pretty hurt right now. But the Bears secondary, the Bears defense in general isn't going to be any better. So you have Sam Howell, who right now he's averaging, I think it's 35 attempts a game, 24 completions. And with, Terry McLaurin getting that much of that target share against this bad of a defense, I really like that matchup. So if you have Terry, you're firing him up in any format. I think he, could very well be due for a touchdown in this one. Jahan Dotson, another receiver on the Commanders. This one I'm not so excited about. He has been kind of iffy throughout this season. We really like the talent, but he hasn't necessarily shown us too much. He got 9 targets last game, but he was only able to get 4 catches for 27 yards. Fortunately, one of those was for a touchdown. So if you started him, you weren't entirely disappointed. But nonetheless, you're seeing Curtis Samuel working a little more than him. Curtis Samuel's been able to do a little more with his targets. He caught 7 of 8 for 51, got 1 rush attempt for a touchdown. I might like Curtis Samuel a little bit more in this one. Jahan Dotson, if you're in a tough position due to the bye weeks this week, I don't hate the start, but I do prefer Curtis Samuel. And then the tight end, Logan Thomas, we all know how the tight ends are right now. And chances are this guy's available for free out on your waiver wire. You can go just add him as a free agent right now that the waivers have run. And in the games he's been healthy, he scored 8.3, 10.2, and then most recently 7.3 against a good Eagles line. Well, the Eagles aren't that great against the tight end, but still the Eagles are a very solid defense. And those are very solid numbers for tight end, unfortunately, but we all know how that goes. And he's going up against the bottom 5 pass defense this weekend. He played 79% of the snaps last weekend in Philadelphia, his first game back from, I think he had a concussion. So you see him jump right back in to a very large role in this offense once he comes back. Then obviously, if I like all the pass catchers, I like the guy throwing them the ball. Sam Howell is a good start for me this week. If you're missing Justin Herbert, if you're missing Deshaun Watson, like I said, if you were missing Baker Mayfield. But yeah, he's averaging 24 completions per game, 35 attempts. He's airing the ball out, and he's shown that he has some rushing upside. He ran the ball 6 times for 40 yards last weekend against Philly. So that's something we like to see. And like I said, this is 31st ranked defense. If you need a guy to pivot to, rather than a guy like Dak, which we're going to talk about later, I'd prefer a guy like Sam Howell.
Yeah, and I'd 100% agree with that. Sam Howell's primed for a very good game. It, something that could scare fantasy owners is, I mean, the Bears' defense is just terrible as a whole. Brian Robinson is probably going to have a monster game. I would not be surprised to see him get 20 fantasy points this week. He should be able to run all over that Bears defense, but that doesn't mean that Sam Howell isn't going to be slinging the ball. Scary Terry's his obvious number one target, and it may surprise some people to hear through 4 weeks, Curtis Samuel has 42.8 fantasy points and Jahan Dotson only has 31. So Curtis Samuel has decently outscored him. I mean, Terry McLaurin has
Yeah.
54. He's obviously the lead guy there. But Curtis Samuel is rostered in 19% of sleeper leagues. He is more than likely available. And as Schiff mentioned, I agree. I do like the Curtis Samuel play over Jahan Dotson this week. I think Jahan Dotson, last year, he had that run where he was catching a touchdown every game, and it inflated those fantasy points a little bit. He's a very talented and young receiver.
Well, and it was with a different quarterback.
Yeah, a different quarterback also. Jahan Dotson's very talented, but Curtis Samuel is established. We know what we can get from him, and he also is very talented. And he's having a quarterback who likes getting him the ball. We've seen Curtis Samuel have a couple really good seasons. I mean, last season he finished as the wide receiver 34 with, 64 receptions, 656 yards, and he also has that rushing upside. He got a rushing touchdown last game. So, I mean, I do like Curtis Samuel over Jahan, and then Logan Thomas. It's a good start because the Bears' defense is so bad. If you have someone else you like more than that, I don't blame you. But in the wasteland of tight ends, it's rolling the dice, and you can never roll wrong against a defense like the Bears. So,
Yeah.
and that's pretty much all I had for them. To go to the Bears side of the ball, they're coming off a
No,
very
yeah, and I mean,
successful.
if you need, if you need a kicker, Joey Sly is not a bad option.
Oh,
I guess
100%.
Cairo Santos isn't a terrible option. I'd prefer Joey Sly, but if you had like Cameron Dicker, Jason Myers, um, which is the Browns kicker,
Hopkins.
can't think. Yeah, Hopkins.
Mm-hmm.
And they're decent pivots, but it's just something to keep an eye out for because if you have your kicker out, make sure that you end up changing it, especially these guys play on Thursday, so the options are going to start to lessen throughout the week. So just pay attention to that.
Yeah, 100%. And on the Bears side of the ball, they're coming off a very good offensive week against the Broncos, which, you know, the the Commanders, they have the 20th ranked pass, the 21st ranked run. They're not a good defense by any means. They are better than the Broncos were. Justin Fields is currently the quarterback 12 after that monster week. I don't hate the Justin Fields start this week. We also have not seen him break out and have one of those rushing games that we saw game in and game out last season. He had a stretch where he was just going insane. We have not seen that from him yet. If you told me you were going to start Justin Fields, especially with, some of the quarterbacks that we have out this week, I don't hate it.
Yeah, no, it's a good start.
Yeah, and the rush game, Khalil Herbert has had 2 games in double digits, one of them where he barely got to double digit fantasy points. He's coming off his best game again against the Broncos. He had 18 carries. Outside of that, his highest carries in a game were 9. I don't
Yeah.
love Khalil Herbert this week. I think if you have other options, I would go to them. I'm not completely against him, but the Bears run game, I am just not sold on.
Yeah, I
Him,
mean, if anything, this past week kind of gives you the hope that they're moving towards Khalil. I mean, he got 78% of the snaps.
mhm.
You're hoping that that continues to trend in that direction. So, like we said, if you don't have the option to start really anyone else decent, given there weren't many waiver wire running backs this week, it's a pretty good start. But I definitely continue to monitor like who gets the larger share of that backfield. If that was just a 1 week thing, and they continue to work Roschon Johnson in more, or if this is how it's going to be, and it is Khalil Herbert's backfield.
Yeah, 100%. Khalil Herbert's one of those guys off that very good week. If I have him, I'm looking to move him immediately. If you have to use him and, whatever piece to get a bit of an upgrade at that RB, a more consistent back, I'd absolutely do so. But again, yeah, with the bye weeks, and it was a decent running back bye week as well, Khalil Herbert's not a bad option. Roschon Johnson's kind of at least faded into the number 2 role for now. He's not really worth talking too much on until we see a bit of a change.
No, it's more of a wait and see thing.
Yeah, and the receiver room is very easy to talk about. You're starting DJ Moore. He's 3 out of the 4 games double digits, but he's an obvious start. He is just so talented, even with the woes of the Bears' pass offense. DJ Moore has still got his, and he will continue to do so. Chase Claypool is away from the team. He is
likely to be traded.
Yeah, he's not going to be a Chicago Bear much longer, and that leaves Darnell Mooney and Equanimeous St. Brown. Darnell Mooney is one of those guys that's super talented, but they just have not. It just hasn't worked for whatever reason. It's not working. Darnell Mooney
is nice to have in a best ball where you don't have to make the decision of starting him on any given week.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, in redraft, depending on how deep the league is, he's really not someone I'm even rostering.
I agree.
At all. Because, it's not, aside from last week, not a very high volume passing offense. And outside of him, or outside of DJ Moore and Kmet, who are the top 2 options, no one else really interests me.
Yeah, and speaking of Cole Kmet, he's just coming off that huge game. He had 2 touchdowns, his best game of the season. The only thing is the Commanders are the number 1 fantasy defense against tight ends. Through 4 games, they've only given up 13 receptions and 83 yards. But again, with Claypool being away from the team and likely gone from the team, DJ Moore and Cole Kmet are their only real options passing the ball. If you told me you were starting Cole Kmet off his hot week, I wouldn't hate you for it, but more than likely, there probably are better options at tight end just for this week. The Commanders have been very stout against the tight end, so I don't know how you feel about it, Schiff, but it's just a tough matchup.
I just like Cole Kmet because, as he's shown throughout his tenure there with Justin Fields, he's one of his favorite options. He's going to probably end up forcing the ball to him. Sometimes he's a red zone target, so he provides like that, touchdown upside. I like the start this week just because, maybe you don't have David Njoku. Chances are the Laportas are gone. Musgrave, we don't know. He's got a concussion. I personally don't like Jonnu Smith that much. I don't like Kyle Pitts. There's just a whole bunch of tight ends that I don't like. And, this guy at least just being one of the favorite targets on the target tree is very consolidated in Chicago. It's like DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, and then whoever else is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
So I like him just for that reason alone.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. The tight end landscape is very horrendous, and when you have a guy like Cole Kmet who is a favorite target for his quarterback, he does have that upside, and that's why I said, I don't hate to start Cole Kmet this week.
Yeah.
It's going to be a shorter episode on this one. We covered the Thursday night game. We are going to go through our start and sits of the week. Schiff, I'll actually let you go first because I believe, if you put 2 down for each position, I only have 1 down. We'll go you 1, me 1, then you 1, and then keep it going.
Okay, yeah. For my first one, I have Sam Howell for a quarterback that I'm starting. We already went over that a bit. He plays Chicago. It's a great matchup. And the quarterback I'm sitting is Dak Prescott.
Yep.
He might not be on a lot of teams. I think he's available in a decent amount of leagues. He's rostered. No, actually, he's rostered in 87% of leagues. So that means a lot of people do have him, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But he faces the Niners this week in Santa Clara. This is a tough defense. We saw them give up some to Josh Doubs, but we've also seen this offense really struggle to get it going. A lot of it because it's been reliant. This team in general has been reliant on its defense, and the offense hasn't had to do too much at all as it is. But this is one matchup that I just don't like at all for the Cowboys offense. We saw them play twice last year. The Niners have kind of had their number. I don't see them doing too much in the way of offensive production. I think, CeeDee Lamb will still eat. He'll still have his. But I don't see Dak, so far, Dak's the QB 22.
Mm-hmm.
His best week came against the Jets. He had 19.6 points, but since then, 15.36 against the Cardinals and 14.34 against the Patriots. I just prefer the quarterback in the plus matchup versus the one who hasn't necessarily been giving you the fantasy finishes you want while also facing a very tough defense.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. And I mean, staying on the trend of, Thursday night quarterbacks, my start for quarterback of the week, Justin Fields. He's coming off a monster game. He feels like a guy at times it seems like he's regressed in his reads down the field in his ability to do so, but he also hasn't had a game where he's really used his legs and kind of shown that rushing upside, and I think this very well could be the game. He's a very not boomer bust. He's getting, low double digits on his bad games because of that rushing upside. But I like this matchup, and I think this could be, a higher scoring game, and this could be a boom week for Fields. My sit of the week.
Very well could be.
Yeah, my sit of the week is Jared Goff. He's playing the Panthers. They're the number 6 ranked passing defense. A couple reasons for this. One, the Panthers have a very strong pass defense. And two, Amon-Ra is hurt, dealing with an abdomen injury. Dan Campbell he wasn't going to give a definitive answer. He didn't sound crazy hopeful that he plays. If he does play, I still don't like Goff that much this week. If he does not play, I really don't like Goff this week. Without Amon-Ra, you're going to see Josh Reynolds, who is also questionable, step into that number 1 role with Khalif Raymond, Marvin Jones, and a Jameson Williams who hasn't played football in quite some time. So it's just tough. Sam Laporta is going to get his. Sam Laporta is going to have a solid week. But I wouldn't be too surprised if this game ended as, like a 17-16, some type of low-scoring game, kind of uglier game where, David Montgomery's getting a bunch of carries and maybe, Jahmyr Gibbs is getting 5 or 6 targets out the backfield. But I don't like the Jared Goff matchup this week.
No, yeah. I mean, that's fair enough. My next guy, Jordan Love, facing the Raiders.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Raiders haven't been horrible as far as going up against quarterbacks, but they haven't shown me anything that I'm scared to start a quarterback.
Yeah.
Justin Herbert had the 2 rushing touchdowns last week. Jordan Love has shown the ability to run the ball. He's, in fact, the quarterback 3 right now. And I like, he has weapons. I don't feel like the Raiders I don't know if Nate Hobbs is going to be back or not. But Marcus Peters isn't going to be able to cover Christian Watson down the field. It's more or less whether or not Max Crosby can wreck the game and how they plan for him. But I do like the matchup, especially giving his running upside. And my sit is Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
He's the QB 19 right now. He has kind of struggled through these first 4 weeks as far as fantasy production. Off the stat sheet, he's been fairly good. And, he also has the ability to run the ball, but we don't see it quite as much. And he's got a very tough matchup this week. He's going up against the Bills, again in London. But even with losing Tre'Davious White, we've seen this Bills defense play without Tre'Davious White before and still have success. So I don't think that this is going to be the week. While last week Trevor Lawrence did look better, I don't think this is going to be the week that his fantasy production just skyrockets. I think this is a week you bench Trevor Lawrence and see which one of these quarterbacks is available on the waiver wire.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to mention. Trevor Lawrence is doing better than a Joe Burrow, but there are guys that we thought were going to be, top 5 fantasy quarterbacks, and they just haven't been. And until they can show that they can get back to that, I mean, I like guys, like he said, Sam Howell's probably available. You have a Matthew Stafford probably available, a Russell Wilson, even a Josh Dobbs
Yeah.
against the Bengals, who, had Tannehill looking okay. It's just, until they show you crazy consistency, obviously don't drop these guys, but if you have a roster spot and you can make a change, 100% agree. I do not like the Trevor Lawrence matchup. I mean, we saw the Texans kind of bottle the Jaguars, so I could imagine, if they
Yeah.
don't come to play, especially in London, how the Bills are going to have them looking.
Yeah. And I mean, that's as much as I got as far as quarterbacks. If you don't have some of these guys available, like I said, I wouldn't necessarily pivot to a Dak Prescott over Trevor Lawrence, or
Yeah.
if you have Dak, like sometimes you got to work with what you got. But if these guys are available, it's decisions I'd consider making. You got to remember the matchup offers a lot more than just the name of these players. Moving on to running back, my start is Brian Robinson. Again, another guy we talked about in the Thursday night matchup. Like, he's the RB8 right now. He should boom this week. He's getting all of the carries at the goal line, aside from the one that Curtis Samuel got, of course, but that's something of an outlier. I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of that. But since we already talked about him, onto the guy that I'm sitting this week, and that's Rhamondre Stevenson. He's the running back 23 right now. We haven't seen what we wanted out of Mondre. He got the 6 targets week 1, but since then hasn't gotten more than 4. And the 16 targets through the first 4 weeks isn't what we expected out of Rhamondre Stevenson. That's something more of what we thought we'd get out of James Cook. But Rhamondre Stevenson was kind of that pass-catching guy that was supposed to kind of be like a little bit lower tier of an Austin Eckler, and he's not showing any of that. And, to boot, he has not topped 60 yards on the ground in a game this season. And he's not really getting the touchdowns. He's facing a tough Saints defense this weekend. If you have another option, then I would pivot away from Rhamondre Stevenson. But, like we said, this running back, it's tough right now, and especially because you got to have the guys like Eckler's been out, but he's on bye this week. Rachaad White's on bye. Jerome. So you might not have any choice but to start Rhamondre. But if you do have an option to pivot away from him, I would do that.
No, and I'd 100% agree. Not much to say on Brian Robinson. We've touched on him enough. He's going to have a very solid week. Mondre, a couple things are really scaring me. One, his yards per carry are 2.73 on the season, down from 4.56 his rookie year, 4.95 last year. That's a huge drop off. And I mean, as he mentioned with the targets as well, he has 16 targets through 4 games in comparison to 88 the year before. So his targets are also dropping a little bit. And I mean, the Patriots offense just also hasn't looked very good at all. So that also hinders him. And he's probably going to play this week, but just worth mentioning also, he was limited today with a thigh injury. Shouldn't bug him too much, but I mean, 100% agree. It's a very tough matchup against the Saints. I would pivot from Andre as well.
And I mean, you heard last week also from the Patriots camp that Zeke was starting to get starting reps, and he didn't end up getting, any significant portion of the snap share in that game. But just hearing that from the Patriots camp is a little concerning. And now, especially given the fact that he's dealing with, even though it may be a minor injury, that could eat into his snap share.
Yeah, 100%. And going to my start of the week at running back, I'm gonna have David Montgomery. Me and Schiff have been the biggest David Montgomery critiques, only because Jahmyr Gibbs has looked so good and the Lions just refuse to give him significant snaps, and us, along with everyone else, was drafting Jahmyr Gibbs, 3rd, 4th round. You're expecting him to get bulk workload, and it just hasn't happened. David Montgomery's playing the Panthers, who are the 27th ranked run defense. And it's one of those things, how when we were talking about Goff, if Amon-Ra does miss this week, David Montgomery's getting 25 carries. It's just going to happen. He's at least getting 20. He's getting the goal line looks. He's just getting so much workload, even if his yards per carry aren't there. His volume just cannot be matched. He's getting if he's getting a touchdown in a game and he's getting 20 carries and a couple targets out the backfield, he's giving you 15 plus every week. And just from what we've seen, he's an obvious start to me. My sit of the week is Kyren Williams against the Eagles, who are the number 2 ranked defense against the run. He's a funny one because he doesn't have competition there. And he's coming off a really strong week. My only thing with him is we saw the Bengals' ability, their defensive line especially, was very solid at kind of stifling that run. And he finished that game with 10 carries and 38 yards. He's getting a lot of targets out the backfield, but in that game, he only had 2 catches, 27 yards. The Eagles are a team that are capable of stopping the run completely. You look at that D-line, and it is just stacked. It's stacked with known veterans that are big names. It's stacked with Jalen Carter. It's a very strong defensive line, and the Rams' offensive line isn't exactly, top of the line. So it's one of those, and he named Rhamondre, I'm naming Kyren Williams. I'm not trying to put a player that is an obvious sit. We're putting guys that more than likely you're still going to start Kyren Williams. I just don't like his matchup this week. If you have another option, I would say go for it. Kyren Williams obviously going to get volume. I just think the Eagles they're going to shut it down.
No, yeah. I mean, I 100% agree with that. Not too much to touch on there. My second guy is Breece Hall for, a running back that I would like to start this week.
Mm-hmm.
He's going up against a rushing defense that has given up nothing but 100-yard rushers in the last 3 weeks. You got Brian Robinson, you got Achane doubling that. And then in this past week, you have Khalil Herbert getting his first 100-yard game. Yeah. To me, that's saying Breece Hall breakout game. Mm-hmm. I love everything about this. They just said this week, just today actually, that they're taking him off of a snap count, meaning goodbye Dalvin Cook. Like, he's absolutely droppable. This is the Breece Hall show. I do not think the offense is going to just all of a sudden be so much better than it was. But given the matchup this week, and, we saw some bright spots out of it last week, I think they can continue to build on that. And this is the week, last week it was Josh Jacobs. We called the Josh Jacobs, blow up game. And this week the guy is Breece Hall.
Mm-hmm.
The guy on the other side of the ball, however, that I am preferring to sit this week is Javonte Williams. They said, it's just the hip and it's nothing too serious. But even through that, I mean, we saw Jaleel McLaughlin come in and look really good. We got to remember Javonte's still coming off of that multi-ligament injury in his knee, so they're still ramping him up, much like Breece Hall. I don't think Javonte has necessarily been taken off of the snap count yet, and especially with this new injury, playing the Jets defense, even though we saw Isaiah Pacheco just tear them up, I don't think it's entirely going to be Javonte Williams in this one. I think he'll be on somewhat of a snap count. And even if not, I just don't necessarily like the matchup against the Jets.
Yeah, no, I would 100% agree with that. I think, Javonte, he is going to be very limited if he practices this week. Jaleel showed some high upside. I don't think it's definitely a week to sit Javonte. I mean, even if you were starting him the first couple weeks, it's not like he has shown you so much that you're like, I'm going to roll the dice on him anyways, even if he is on a snap count. So if he does happen to be on a snap count, that could hurt him even more. So 100% agree with that one.
Yeah. So, with that, we're going to go into the wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
My first guy is Zay Flowers. We've seen that even when healthy, Rashad Bateman is not going to be the number one in this offense. I am not sure whether or not Odell's going to be playing, but if he does, I think he'll be on more of a snap count. He's a guy that they want to keep healthy for later in the year. And Zay Flowers, like we've been talking about, I mean, he didn't have the greatest game, but his worst game so far last week, and he got 8 points in a PPR, format. But he's going up against the Steelers defense that's been giving it up. and that's nothing that I'm afraid of. Last week, the Browns' pass defense was a whole lot better, and he still was able to give you a semi-decent week. I think this week, maybe he gets in the end zone this week. Actually, you know what? I'm calling it. Zay Flowers getting in the end zone this week.
You heard it here first. You heard it here.
But, with highs come the lows, and in that same game, I think George Pickens is a wide receiver to sit.
Yeah.
We saw, and Kenny Pickett is not a first game rookie DTR, but at the same time, Kenny Pickett's not going to be 100% healthy, and the word is that he's going to play. This is a rivalry game. Wow. The Ravens are going to be coming after him. Mm-hmm. It might get ugly. It's always a tough game, the Ravens and the Steelers, but we just saw, and like I said, it's not DTR, but we still saw Amari Cooper be highly limited in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Marlon Humphrey should be back in this one. Marcus Williams might be back in this one. With the Ravens defense bolstering, you lose Pat Freiermuth as a safety valve. I think it's going to be tough. If George Pickens does get a decent amount of targets, I think they're going to be very close to the line of scrimmage, which I think a lot of targets might end up going to Jaylen Warren and maybe Najee Harris.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see this being a very productive game for George Pickens with the way the Ravens defense has been playing. And we'll see, but, I don't like it.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. And for Zay Flowers, the Steelers secondary isn't exactly that great. You have Patrick Peterson back there. He is an absolute legend, but he is old at this point. He is getting very old. Zay Flowers is very fast and very shifty. He is definitely going to get open.
We saw him get turned to absolute burnt toast by Nico Collins last week.
Yeah, and there's not much more to say for Zay Flowers. He's definitely primed to have a very big week, as him and Mark Andrews are the Ravens' two main targets through the air. And George Pickens, he's scored single digits 2 out of the 4 games. Against the Raiders, he just squeaked into the double digits. And against the Texans, we saw him, 5.5 fantasy points without Pat Freiermuth, without Deontay Johnson. Kenny Pickett banged up. There's no real threat in the run game. When you look at him, he's their real only threat. And the Ravens defense is 1, good enough, and 2, smart enough to key in on that, especially in a rivalry game. 100%. If I saw George Pickens end this game with,
have him blanketed.
Yeah, if he finishes 3-4 catches for 45 yards, I would not be surprised. I think the Steelers' offense is going to struggle, just like the Browns did this past week, to score the ball.
Yeah, and granted, it isn't a rookie's first start, but nonetheless, it's a banged-up quarterback. The offensive line hasn't been doing well at all. They have nothing to offer in the run game that the Ravens aren't going to be able to handle and absolutely annihilate. So I just don't see it happening. If you have to start George Pickens, by all means, go ahead, but just know you were warned.
Yeah, and that's going to take me to my start of the week. Romeo Doubs. Romeo Doubs. Against the Las Vegas Raiders in Las Vegas. We have seen him emerge as, Christian Watson's the number 1, but Romeo Doubs has shown to possibly have the best connection with Jordan Love just due to his availability out on the field. These past 2 weeks alone, he has 25 targets, which is very nice to see, and that was the Saints and the Lions, who both probably have better secondaries than the Raiders. He's scored 18 points his past 2 weeks, and against this Raiders defense that, Nate Hobbs probably will not play. If he does, he's a slot or a nickel corner. I just see him having success. The Raiders aren't too good at, shutting down wide receivers, and it's just primed to be a good week for Romeo Doubs. On the other side,
I agree.
I think my sit might surprise Schiff and anyone listening a little bit. My sit of the week's Devonta Smith. He's playing the Rams. They're the number 7 pass defense. they've shown ability to stifle the pass, and their run defense isn't the greatest outside of Aaron Donald. I think it's a game that, and they're also not very good against the tight end. I could see Dallas Goedert having a very solid game. A.J. Brown is going to get his. DeAndre Swift's going to be able to get the ball through the air. The thing with Devonta Smith is
You're on record supporting Dallas Goedert.
I'm on record saying he could get volume because they haven't gave him any. They're paying him, and he's playing. Whatever. We're on air supporting Dallas Goedert. It is what it is.
Not we, him.
I'm on air.
Him.
2 out of the 4 games this year, Devonta Smith has seen 5 targets and caught 4 passes. One of those against Minnesota, he had an extremely deep catch, so he finished with 131 yards and a touchdown. But when he played the Bucs, he had 4 catches for 28 yards. And the Bucs have a decent secondary. The Rams also have a decent secondary. Again, he's a guy you're starting. I like throwing the bold predictions. I like being like, let's not start Devonta Smith. He's my sit. You're probably going to start him still, but he's my sit because I just don't think he's going to have a good week. We'll see how it plays out. But I know Schiff's going to say you should,
I'm not, but I mean, if we had all the same opinions, then it wouldn't
what would be
very
the point?
Interesting at all, But my second wide receiver is a guy that I didn't like so much in the beginning of the year. I'm starting to come around because, I mean, how do you hate a guy? He gets 14 targets in the last game. That's going to be Garrett Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to continue to be force-fed the ball. And if you're in a PPR, half PPR setting, that's really all you can ask for, especially with the receiver as talented as Garrett Wilson. He's going to continue to get it done. I mean, hell, if you throw him 14 balls and he catches at least half of them, that's 7 points right there, plus whatever yards he goes for.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, he's due for a touchdown, and what better week to get it than against the Denver Broncos?
Yeah.
Which we've seen them do nothing but give up points, give up yards. They've been terrible despite having one of the best cornerbacks in the league. I don't think, even if they have Pat Surtain on Garrett Wilson, I think they'll move Garrett Wilson around. They'll move him into the slot. They'll motion him. They'll find ways to get him open.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be a problem at all. And, in that same game, my sit is Courtland Sutton. We've seen Courtland Sutton have very good fantasy production so far this year, but in this matchup, we just saw what the Jets defense was able to do against Patrick Mahomes. It was a disappointing week. If you had Mahomes, if you had Kelsey, you only got 12 points. I mean, that's not what you drafted Travis Kelsey for. None of the other receivers were getting anything done. I mean, outside of a broken play touchdown to Noah Gray, it was an ugly game for the Chiefs offense. That doesn't give me any confidence that the Broncos offense is going to do anything better. I mean, like we said, if you're missing Mike Evans, if you're missing Keenan Allen, you're missing Chris Godwin this week, you have to start Courtland Sutton, then all right, but I wouldn't expect too much because this is a pretty stifling Jets pass defense. They have a good pass rush. Russell Wilson's probably going to be getting pressured a lot. This Broncos offensive line is dealing with injuries. Whose isn't? But I think it's going to be tough sledding for Courtland Sutton this week.
No, and I'd agree. Garrett Wilson, there's not too much to touch on. He's the only... I mean, he is head and shoulders above any other receiver in that room. Allen Lazard's solid, but Garrett Wilson, we're seeing him get the volume no matter what. They're going to force him the ball. He's their most talented pass catcher. He was able to get it done against the Chiefs. Zach Wilson looked a lot better, and now he's playing the Broncos defense. And then for Courtland Sutton, he's scored double digits every single week, but he's also had 5 targets 2 of those 4 weeks, one of them being against a Bears defense that is horrendous. He had 5 targets, 3 catches, 27 yards, got saved by the touchdown. When you have 3 touchdowns through 4 weeks, that looks really good. But as we keep saying, touchdowns are not a sticky stat. And at this pace, Courtland Sutton on pace to catch 14, 15 touchdowns, I just don't see it happening. So if he does not get a touchdown this game, which there's a very good chance that he doesn't, I could see him,
Yeah, I
yeah.
don't
I could
see it
definitely
happening.
see him scoring, 6, 7 points this week. I would not be shocked at all.
Yeah. And with that, we're gonna go into our tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, another guy that I mentioned before that we talked about in this Thursday night game, I do like Cole Kmet. He just provides the upside that a lot of tight ends don't. While a lot of tight ends don't necessarily get that many targets in the red zone, we do see that Cole Kmet, getting those 2 touchdowns last week. It's something that in the tight end position, when mostly you can count on 4, 5, 6 points, he offers you an upside that most tight ends don't, outside of very few. If you don't have the Travis Kelce, if you don't have the Mark Andrews at this point, I guess you can put Sam Laporta up there, TJ
Absolutely
Hawkinson.
you do.
And he just provides you that same upside. And at that tight end position, that's something we're asking for. And he's on the field a lot. And the guy that I'm sitting, I know it looks good coming off of a 95-yard, 6-catch week. But Jonnu Smith, guys, He only played 55% of the snaps. If you watch that game, a lot of those targets came in like garbage time. Does that really matter for fantasy? No, it doesn't. But I'm saying that may have just been due to the game script. And while he is out targeting and has more receiving yards than Kyle Pitts on the year, I don't like either tight end there. The only option for pass catcher I truly like in Atlanta is Drake London.
Yeah. And even he is shaky. Yeah.
That's very iffy. But Jonnu Smith just doesn't show me anything that I could count on a week-to-week basis, even, in a week where you might need a tight end. I'd much rather have a guy like Cole Kmet than somebody in just a very not even mediocre, a very poor passing offense that he's on the field barely over half of the snaps, and that's not really what you want for your tight end.
Yeah, I would like to note really quick that I am writing for Dallas Goddard, and Schiff is writing for Cole Kmet against the number 1 defense against the tight end. I completely agree. Cole Kmet could have a solid game. I actually like the must start. It's, kind of a gutsy play, but in fantasy football, that's what wins you weeks. If you lose a week because you make a gutsy play, I'm a lot less upset than if I played it safe, didn't go with my gut, and lost that way. Jonnu Smith.
I mean, Dallas Goddard just has not shown me anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just one of those things, like, how many weeks am I going to wait?
Yeah, and with Jonnu Smith, he's had a couple solid weeks, but it's just, like he said, that Falcons offense is just ugly outside of Bijan. They have crazy talent in Drake London and Kyle Pitts and just can't figure out a way to get them the ball. They're somewhat have got Jonnu the ball. He had that 95-yard game, but I completely agree. The Texans are a actual solid defense, awkwardly. They've had a couple solid weeks, the Jags and the Steelers, and both of those offenses I like more than I like the Falcons offense. So I'd completely agree. I think that's a very solid sit. For my start of the week, I have Tyler Higbee. He is going against the Eagles, who are the second worst against the tight end. Again, Tyler Higbee signed that big contract. He is getting volume, and obviously they plan to use him for the future.
Oh, yeah.
If Cooper Kupp comes back, I don't think he's going to return this week. I'm going to lay it out both ways. If he does come back, I think Tyler Higbee, he's been there long enough. We know what we get from Tyler Higbee. And this season at tight end, it's been enough to be considered for a start. And this week specifically, I really like them because of how bad they are against the tight end, because of how good they are against the run. The Rams may have to pass the ball. And on my other side, I'm going to sit Hunter Henry. The Patriots just have not looked good. Not specifically, rushing, passing, all of it has not looked good.
It's nothing specific.
Yeah,
it's just bad in general.
I was about to give them credit because
I'm sorry, bud.
I was gonna give him credit in the run game because I'm like, oh, they have Mondre, and then I just remembered how terrible Mondre has been
Rhamondre's been,
doing.
dude, it's insane.
One thing with Hunter Henry, he's out there around 80% of the snaps. He's getting at least 5 targets a game, but we've seen, against the Jets, he got 5 targets, 2 catches, 17 yards. The Saints give up the 28th fewest. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. They're like a top 5 defense against the tight end. I may have said that backwards. But they're a top 5 defense against the tight end. Yeah.
They understand.
The Saints have a very solid defense, and they're not as good as the Cowboys with turnovers and things like that, but that defense is tough. And just how the Patriots have looked, their inability to run, and then when you're relying on the pass, you don't have real weapons out there. You have Mac Jones at quarterback. Hunter Henry's a sit for me until the Patriots can show that they can move the ball at a bit better of a pace, because when you're not scoring many points, you're not getting many red zone targets, and you're looking at teams, like a Bears team with Cole Kmet, who's going against the Commanders. Even though the Commanders are super good against the tight end, you assume it'll be a higher scoring game. Cole Kmet's a favorable red zone target, therefore he'll get more opportunities. I don't see that happening for Hunter Henry in this game.
No, I mean, as of right now, I just don't really like the Patriots offense in general. Definitely a tight end I'd hold on to. I mean, given the tight end landscape that we all know. But yeah, if you could pivot to a different guy this week, I would definitely prefer that. And then kind of to wrap it up, I just had, I mentioned if you have room to bench like the Cowboys defense against the Niners this week, and maybe pivot to like defenses I like are the Lions going up against the Panthers. They've done well the past few weeks. The Dolphins going against the Giants. The Giants have an offensive line that,
It's
you
made
could
of
probably stick
paper.
some grade schoolers on and get sacks.
Yeah.
So the Dolphins are going to eat against that. You can count on a whole bunch of sacks. And I mean, maybe the Commanders if you want to get a little spicy.
Yeah, that is a spicy one.
Yeah, but the Cowboys and honestly, maybe the Niners are not defenses that I'd prefer to play this week. And yeah, guys, that's about it. We'll see you again on Friday with the Thursday night breakdown, and we'll have a few more segments then. But, take care. Leave us any comments or questions in the comments. Derek, if you got anything else?
No, we're good to go.
All right, guys, come back next time. Take more reps with the first team.
Till next time.